Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about a brand new powder foundation from Natasha Denona, and I have been using this over the past week or so, and I've been finding that it has been working really well for me on my own mature and dry and sensitive skin. So I've been a little bit surprised about that, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. In addition, I thought that I would take this opportunity to talk about some of the other makeup products that I have from Natasha Denona, including some of her eyeshadow palettes and a few other items. And it is the case that some of her eyeshadow palettes that are still on the market do contain aluminum powder or Teflon. So those are ingredients that I do need to avoid, and I know that there are a lot of other people that avoid those as well. So I will let you know which palettes from Natasha Denona seem to have the most potential for those of us who do have sensitive skin and sensitive eyes. So first, a little bit of information about me. I'm 59 years old and I do have very sensitive and dry skin, and I have never had any kind of cosmetic procedures such as injections or surgery, and I also don't use any filters or photoshopping on this channel. So it is my goal to find some makeup products and skincare products that can help me to look a little bit fresher and maybe even a little bit younger. And over the past 3 years, I've tried more than 1,000 makeup products, and I've looked closely at the ingredient list for all of those. So I do have a pretty good sense of what works for me, and as a good comparison for all of the products that I may try that are new. And one thing that I have found is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my sensitive skin, and I know that those are ingredients that tend to be irritating for many other people as well. So I just don't talk about products that contain those ingredients on this channel. So one thing that I have noticed in the past is that most of the complexion products and some of the other products from Natasha Denona do include unspecified fragrance, and that is an ingredient that I do always avoid because my experience is that it almost always does prove to be irritating to my sensitive skin. But what I found with this particular new foundation, the powder one, is that it doesn't have any fragrance in it at all, and it doesn't have any ingredients in it that I know are always problematic for me. And so I was really happy to find that out, and I did pick this up right away. And I have found that this has been perfectly fine for my skin, and that I have been able to wear it for a number of days in a row. And I have been, at one point I fell asleep in this and it seemed to be fine to me, and my skin seems to be holding up really well. So I'm really happy that there is this new product that I am able to tolerate, and that does seem to be working well for me in general as a foundation. Now, according to the website, it says that this is a powder foundation that is supposed to blur the skin's texture and to leave it smooth, poreless, and with a matte finish. And it's said to have medium buildable coverage, and they also claim that it protects the skin against environmental stressors and supports the skin's elasticity and hydration. And they are claiming also that it is anti-inflammatory. So when I look at the ingredient list, I am not sure what it is about this foundation that they think is anti-inflammatory. It does say that it includes raspberry leaf extract, so maybe that is what they are thinking about. And it also does include some avocado oil, which I think may give it a little bit of hydration or moisturizing benefits as well. Otherwise, I think that the ingredient list for this foundation is pretty standard for foundations in general. So it includes some natural and synthetic mica. It includes some silicones and some preservatives and some coloring agents. And by the way, mica does not necessarily always have shimmeriness to it. So if you see mica on an ingredient list or you see synthetic mica, then that does not mean that this is going to have a shimmer, and this is a totally matte foundation. Now, the product does list on the ingredient list alumina, which is aluminum oxide. So I am really reactive to aluminum powder, and I think that part of the issue with that is that that is a form of aluminum that is penetrating the skin pretty readily, whereas something like alumina is much less penetrating, and I have not had issues with that myself in any case. So in terms of my previous experiences with powder foundations, I have tried the loose powder foundations from Bare Minerals and from Jane Iredale's, so I do have a little bit of experience with that. Other than that, in terms of the kind of compact powder foundations that have silicone in them, I have really only had one experience with a foundation like that, and that was a number of years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago or so, when I was traveling around the United States in my RV, and I had a minimum number of possessions, and the one foundation that I did have was a foundation like that was from Aveda. And that foundation is not on the market anymore, but I actually did kind of like it at the time. I thought that it looked fairly nice on my skin and that it performed pretty well for me in terms of giving me a little bit of coverage, and it was really easy to put on. And I thought that it looked nice, and I don't recall it irritating my skin. So that is part of the reason that I purchased this product from Natasha Denona so quickly, because I did have a good experience with that Aveda product. And I do think that if anything, this product is even better than the Aveda one in terms of not irritating my skin and in terms of providing some nice coverage that holds up really well and that doesn't sink into my wrinkles or make my face look worse than it did to start out with. So I've been really happy about it so far. So I am not sure how much I'm going to be using this product, though, on a regular basis. I still think a foundation like this is probably most appropriate for travel. So I think that if I were to go out on the road again and see some more sights, that I probably would think about a product like this. And I also think that this would be particularly good for airline travel because it's not liquid. And I think that you could travel with it in your carry-on pretty easily. I don't think it would break really easily. I do think it has enough moisture to it that it probably would stay in place fairly well. And I also think that if you just want a foundation to throw in your bag and to use for touch-ups during the day when you're away from home, that this one could be a good product for that as well. Now, when I have used the Bare Minerals powder foundation or the Jane Iredale powder foundation, I feel like they've actually worked reasonably well for me, considering the fact that I would imagine that they would be really drying and really problematic with my wrinkles, but I think that they've actually been better than I would have thought. But I do usually put those down over a primer, and often I do put them over a silicone type primer. And so I think that that's part of the reason that those have worked well. On the other hand, with this new Natasha Denona foundation, I have not been really using it over any kind of primer at all. I usually do put down some kind of a moisturizer before I put down any kind of foundation. And in this case, I've been recently using a product called the Ilia Face Base. And that one does have some things like hyaluronic acid and squalane in it. So it does seem to be pretty good for my skin, and it does provide a little bit of a tacky type of a surface to put products on top of. But I really think that this one is acting really well, and that the silicone and other ingredients in the product are making it perform really, really well regardless of what I have on my face. And I really haven't found that it has sunk into my wrinkles or exacerbated the look of the texture on my skin. Now, it does say that it's supposed to minimize the look of pores. I would not say that it makes my pore situation look better. I would say that maybe it makes it look a little bit worse, but it's really minor compared to many of the other foundations that I have tried. And I do think it holds up really well. So I have not worn it in really, really hot weather yet. We haven't had any hot weather here over the past few days, but I have worn it when I have been out hiking and walking my dog. And I think that it has held up really well for that, in addition to just holding up throughout the day. And it even looked pretty good when I had slept in it and I woke up and my face still was looking pretty good. And I kind of think that it goes on looking pretty nice, but that over time it actually starts to look even better and to kind of meld with my skin. So I think all of those things are kind of a pleasant surprise and not really what I was anticipating. Now, the fact that this is a powder foundation does not necessarily mean that you should not be expecting it to be performing like a silicone foundation. There is a lot of silicone in here. And I have found that when I try to remove it with just a water-based makeup remover, which is what I would usually remove a lot of makeup with, that this really does not succeed in taking this product off, and that I do really need to use the kind of makeup remover that I would use to remove a really good silicone foundation. So I can either use a cleansing oil, or I can use the Pharmacy Cleansing Balm, or best of all would be the Lisa Eldridge cleanser, which has a variety of ingredients in them that take off pretty much anything that I put on my face pretty easily. So in general, my tendency is not to wear silicone foundations on a regular basis. And my experience is that if I do that too much, that I think that what happens is that all of the muck from my face, so dirt and oils and dead skin cells and bacteria, that they tend to get trapped underneath the silicone, and that if I do that for too long, that it does tend to start to irritate my face a little bit, and that my skin quality does start to go down. So what I generally do, of course, I take off my makeup at the end of the day, and I try to be really conscientious about using something that will actually remove all of it. But I still feel like it's really best for me if I only use silicone type foundations on occasion rather than using them every day. And that would be my inclination with this particular foundation as well. So in the instructions for this product that are on the website, it is suggested that you can put this on in a number of different ways. So it comes with a little puff that is like a sponge almost, and it is one that you can just use dry and put on the foundation and then put a little bit on your skin. And I actually really like using it this way, and I especially like using it this way because this is something that I think is particularly convenient for being on the road, and that is, I think, the main reason that I would want to be using this product. So it fits into the bottom of the container, and then there is at the bottom here, there's there's some air holes in there to give it some ventilation. And I think that this is a very nice way to use the product. Now, I know that there are a lot of people that are really concerned about that in terms of whether or not the sponge is going to get dirty. And I suppose that it would get a little bit dirty over time, just as a powder puff in a old-fashioned compact of face powder would get a little bit dirty. But I'm not really inclined to wash that sponge. I'm not really, don't really feel very good about sponges after I wash them. I feel like most of the time, once I have washed a sponge, it never really feels great to me again. And so I think that what I would kind of like is to be able to replace this particular item. Unfortunately, I have not found on the Natasha Denona website that you can buy replacements for these. And I think that even if you buy a replacement for the powder part of this, I'm not even sure that comes with the sponge. So that's a little bit disappointing, and I think that it might be the case that if I looked on Amazon, I might be able to find some replacement sponges that would be similar and not be too expensive. So I might look into doing that. But I will admit, and maybe this is something I should try to keep to myself, but I will admit that when I was using that Aveda product, I almost always put it on with the sponge, and I would use a particular confect for at least a month or two, and it seemed like the sponge was fine to me, and I never felt like I had any problems with it. So I am not as eager as some people are to think that I need to wash this sponge every time or not use it at all. And I do think that for travel purposes, this is by far going to be the way I would prefer to put it on. But on the other hand, it does say on the website that you could also put it on with some kind of a brush. So one kind of brush that you could use was one like maybe this. So it has short bristles and it's very dense. This is the Jones Road Everything brush. And so you can just put a little bit on like this and then buff it in. Or even if you put it on with the sponge, you may want to buff it into the skin with a brush like this just to make it kind of meld more with your skin. And one kind of brush that I think might work reasonably well on the road would be like a retractable kabuki brush, which would have really dense bristles and then would fold into itself so that you could just throw it into your bag without it getting too dirty. And I think that I do have a brush like that somewhere. I think I might have gotten it from Bare Minerals maybe, or from RMS. And so I'm going to try to dig that out and see if that will work with this, because I think that that might be a good substitute for the sponge if I can't find any sponge replacements that I really like. And then it also said on the website that you could use a fluffier brush and that that would provide a little bit less coverage, but that it would still work and it would be more like a finishing type of a powder. And so I have tried a couple of other brushes. This is just like a big powder brush, or this is a brush that's sort of like a buffing brush that's a little bit softer. And so I've used sort of a variety of brushes with this over the past several days, and I think that all of those things have actually worked really well, and that I've been able to get some reasonable coverage and a really nice look, sort of regardless of which method I have been using. But I do kind of agree that regardless of what method I use to actually get the powder onto my skin, if I spend a little bit of time with a brush similar to this one, and this is a buffing brush from Say, and I just spend a little bit of time sort of brushing it into my skin fairly lightly, that this does make it sink into my skin a little bit faster and to look a little bit nicer. So one thing that I will say is that this particular foundation has a 24-month stated usage life, so they must be feeling that this is not a product that is going to go bad really easily. And so my feeling is that probably if I continue to use the sponge that they gave me for a while, it'll probably be fine. And I did ask them in a letter if they would we're going to be making any sponges available for sale, or if the refills come with sponges, and they haven't gotten back to me on that yet, but if I do hear from them, then I will put a message in the comments section letting you know what they said. So like most Natasha Denona products, this one is made in Italy, and it is $55, and the refills are $39. And there are 36 shades, and what I found to be interesting was that they have all of the shades divided up into 4 categories. So there are neutral, rosy, yellow, and peach. And the peach ones, I was really happy to see that because that tends to work well for my own skin tone. So what I tend to find is that I am sort of right on the border between fair and light, and that if a foundation actually says peach in the description of it, then usually that works well for me. And so what I feel like that is suggesting is that there are a lot of both yellow tones and reddish tones in the foundation, and I do think that that is the case with my skin. And so I picked out the shade P2, and that one does seem to have worked well for me. Now, what is a little bit odd about this foundation line is that they don't seem to be recognizing the concept of olive skin at all. So there aren't any mentions of olive skin, and so I'm not sure what color people with olive skin are supposed to be choosing. So I don't know if the ones that are more neutral would work for them or not. On the website, there is a quiz that you can take, which is basically just asking you how dark is your skin and does your skin have a rosy, yellow, peach, or neutral undertone. And so it did give me that P2 as the answer for that. Now on the Ulta site, the product is available now, and they did ask me what other foundations I had had success using. And when I gave them some of those, the answers that they gave me in terms of which product I should get from this line, they were all over the board, and I did not find that to be helpful at all. So I don't feel like Ulta has gotten that information very straightened out, so I wouldn't necessarily pay attention to those recommendations. And they say on the Ulta website that it is going to be coming to Ulta stores on June 9th, and I don't know if that is going to be all Ulta stores or if Natasha Denona products in general are now going to be available in Ulta stores. I think that would be great if the Natasha Denona line were available in Ulta stores. I would really appreciate being able to go in and try out a few products. At Sephora, I've only had success in finding a few of the eyeshadow palettes there, so I don't know if this product will be available at Sephora, but I'm kind of guessing maybe it's not going to be available at Sephora at all. And so far it's not available on the Sephora website. And then in terms of a wear test for this foundation, you know, I don't usually have a lot of problems with foundations falling apart on my skin. I do have dry skin. And what tends to happen is that if the foundations look good for me at the beginning of the day, right after I put them on, then usually they will stay looking pretty much like that for an extended period of time. I feel like with this one, it actually looked better for me as the day went on. And certainly after a few hours, it seemed to look better than when I put it right on my face. So I do think that this kind of sinks into the skin and then kind of melds with it. So I thought that, at least for me, that was nice. And I think that is one of the reasons why I think it's a good idea to kind of buff it into the skin with the brush so that that melding with the skin process goes a little bit faster. In terms of the coverage, I think it's providing somewhere between a good solid light or maybe a medium coverage, depending on how much I put on. I do think it does a really good job of covering redness on my skin, and I think that I do need to have some kind of a concealer under my eyes. I think probably if I were going to use this on the road, what I would probably want to do is put on a little bit of a color corrector under my eyes. And then I think that for the kinds of issues that I have, that I could probably just use this powder foundation for all of the rest of the issues, and that it would cover up small inconsistencies in my skin and redness around my nose and those kinds of things. And unlike many foundations, I do feel like this one is okay to use in my eye area. I don't feel like it sinks into the wrinkles around my eyes and makes them look a lot worse, and it hasn't been irritating for use anywhere on my face. So I do feel like, especially if I'm using it with a little puff like that, that I can use it sort of more on a spot basis if I need to, but I can also use it kind of more diffusely over my whole face. So now that I've had some success with this, I am wondering if maybe I should try some other powder foundations that are in compacts and that have silicones on the ingredient list, that maybe that I have been really missing out on them. So I have looked a little bit for some other options. So both Jane Iredale and Bare Minerals, they do make foundations like that, and so I am a little bit interested in picking up one or both of those and giving them a try. Makeup Forever is not a brand that I have used at all before, because almost everything from them does have fragrance in it or other ingredients that are problematic for me. But they do make a compact powder foundation that seems like their ingredient list is not too bad and that does not include fragrance in it. So I'm thinking that I should be able to at least take a little look at that at Sephora, so I'm definitely interested in that one. And I see that Estee Lauder, which is another brand that I really haven't been able to use at all because they put things like sunscreen and fragrance in almost everything, it looks like their powder foundation might conceivably be okay for me as well. So I'm going to take a little look at that as well. And then Fenty, I don't feel like I have had any products from Fenty that I've been that crazy about of the ones that I try, but they also have a powder foundation like this that looks like it might have potential. So I am wondering if you have tried any powder foundations like this and if you have had any success with them, if you have, or I'm wondering if you would be interested in my trying out some more foundations like this, and if this is something that you might find to be useful in your own life if we can find ones that are any good. And now let's talk about a few of the other Natasha Denona products that I have tried. So the first one is called the Hyper Natural Face Palette, and it was released a month or two ago, I think. And it is designed to be a clean beauty product, so it doesn't have any of the ingredients in it that I consider to be problematic, that have been in many of the Natasha Denona products. It doesn't have any talc in it, it doesn't have any fragrance, it doesn't have any aluminum powder, and of course it doesn't have any Teflon in it. And I have tried this out on a number of occasions, and I have found that it has been perfectly fine on my face, and it hasn't caused any irritation at all. So it looks like this, and it has 5 eyeshadows in it that you can apply with your fingers, and then it has a blush section here which has 2 different colors of blush, and it has 3 different colors of bronzer. And these are powder products, but they're fairly soft products, so I could put this on with my fingers and blend it in. I don't think that that is as ideal, and I don't think it does it as easily as either the RMS product or the House Labs product, but it is something that I have experimented with a little bit, and it is a fairly soft powder formula. And this is made in Italy again, and it has a 24-month usage life, so even though it is supposed to be clean beauty, it does have an extended life that goes beyond the 6 months that some companies are promising these days. So I do really like the eyeshadows in this palette. They are designed to be used primarily as one-and-done shadows, or you can also use them in combination with one another, or you could use them in combination with other products. So this color here in particular, this one has a nice little shimmer to it, which I think works well with the variety of different eyeshadows, including ones that are not from this palette. But I think that all of these are really pretty enough to be going on the eyes individually, and that they do go on really well with my fingers, or I can use a brush, and sometimes I have blended them together. And I do think that these dark shades, that they work well as eyeliner as well as eyeshadows. Now the powder products for the bronzer and the blush, I find this to be a little bit weirder, in large part because I think that these little slots here, they're really much too small to put much of a brush in there, and that if you're thinking that you're going to be able to pick up just one of these colors, I think that that's very difficult to do, even with a small brush, so I'm not quite sure what they are thinking here. If I use my fingers and I pick up, then I can pick up like just this part of the blush, or I can pick up this one, and then I can kind of apply this to my skin and then kind of buff it in. And that actually kind of works, but they're not really suggesting you do it that way. So I think that that is a way that I might be able to get some more use out of this palette, because then I might be able to use each of these colors more individually. And then I buff it in with the brush like this, then it actually works okay. So that is something that I've been experimenting with. Now, it used to be the case that I was really kind of worried about using powder products in this way, because I would feel like the oils from my skin would cause them to hard pan and then not be useful. But what I have been experimenting recently with is using some Scotch tape to remove the hard pan if it occurs, and I think that that might have some potential. So that is something that I'm being a little bit less worried about with a palette like this. In general, I think that they probably could have done a better job using this space up here in terms of maybe finding a universal shade of a bronzer, or maybe using something that was a little bit creamier. And I think you could certainly find a universal shade of a blush where you wouldn't have to have two different colors. But in general, I think that it's really nice that they are putting together a palette that is designed to be for clean beauty, and that they actually did make it in ingredients that are working really well for me and not causing any irritation. So I am hoping what we will see from Natasha Denona is some more palettes or some more makeup items that will be appropriate for those of us who do have sensitive skin. Now, what I kind of think is that this palette is probably most appropriate for use as a travel palette, and that if you had just this palette in your travel bag, that would pretty much take care of all of your need for color cosmetics. And then if I threw this palette into the bag along with it, then that would pretty much take care of most of the need for any cosmetics. And then if I just had like a lipstick and an eyebrow pencil and maybe a mascara, then that would be all that I would need. And so I think that this could be a really good combination for that purpose. I have used it occasionally, especially because I do like the eyeshadows at home, but I think for travel purposes this might be particularly nice. I'm not sure that it would be a palette that anyone would get really excited about in terms of the colors of the blush or the bronzer. I think that this is something that would be adequate for a lot of people, and that it would be good enough to be using on an extended basis while on a vacation or on a long trip, and that I would be able to make do with it. But I think that I still think they could do a little better. So now let's finish up by talking about a few of the other makeup products from Natasha Denona that I have tried and that I have actually really liked. So the first one is this little miniature eyeshadow palette. Now, Natasha Denona has a bunch of different miniature eyeshadow palettes like this, And most of them do have either aluminum powder or Teflon or both of them in them. So I haven't picked up any of those. But I have been able to use a few of the shadows that are on the market. And one of them, the newest one, which was released just a couple of months ago, is this one, which is called My Mini Dream. And this is called My Mini Dream because it is based supposedly on Natasha Denona's favorite shade from the My Dream palette, and it's more of kind of a neutral brown type of a color. So she expanded on that with all of these different colors. However, the thing to know about this palette is that it really seems to be much more similar to the I Need a Nude palette, which has been really, really popular, rather than to the My Dream palette. So this is what the I Need a Nude palette looks like. So it has a lot of cool neutral type shades in it. And then this one is very much, I think, the same color story. So I think that I really do like this I Need a Nude palette, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But in the case of this palette, I think that you can get a very similar look, not quite as many subtly different looks, but I think that the looks that I get from this little palette are very similar to the I Need a Nude palette. And it obviously is much more travel friendly, and it's obviously much less expensive. And so this has 2 shimmers in it and then 3 mattes, and one of the mattes is a dark brown that I usually will use as an eyeliner, and then I can use the other 4 shades in combination with one another. And I think this does give a really current and modern and attractive look that I can wear with just about anything, and so I've gotten a lot of use out of this so far. And then at the same time that she released the My Mini Dream palette, she also released this blush, and this is called My Mini Dream Glow Blush. So again, it has 3 different shades in it. 2 of these are matte type shades, and then there is one that's more like a highlighter. And I found this one to be a little bit easier to work with in terms of being able to create either more of a matte look or more of a shimmer look, or I can use both of them in combination. But I think that this has worked really well for me, and I think it's a very good price. It's only about $20, and I think that it's actually a really pretty product. And it does have a little bit of talc in it, but it has been perfectly fine on my face, and it hasn't irritated my face at all. And I do think that the colors in this are really pretty. So one of them is sort of more of a darker rose, and then there's a more of a neutral type of light peachish beige type color, and then the highlighter is more like a champagne. And then another product that I have from Natasha Denona is this lip liner, and this is called the I Need a Nude Lip Crayon, and it's a sharpenable pencil. And I think that the color for this one is pretty similar to the new Mob Beauty M1990 shade that is a recreation of the original MAC Spice shade. So what I have here on my wrist is at the top I have this pencil from Natasha Denona, and then in the middle here I have the Mob Beauty 1991, and at the bottom I have the Jane Iredale Spice pencil. And I think all of these create a very similar look. I will say that I'm not that crazy about the formula for this pencil. It is made in Italy, but I feel like it doesn't sharpen quite as well as I would like, and it also seems to have little pieces of the pencil come off on my lips that I need to kind of brush off or smooth in when I use it. So I think that this is, it's not a bad pencil. It hasn't irritated my lips. It seems to perform really well, but it probably wouldn't be the one that I would pick. Now, one thing that I have found is that if I swatch this pencil on my hand, that it does last for a much longer time than many other lip pencils in my collection, and I do think that it lasts longer on my lips as well, so that is really important. And then I also picked up one of the lipsticks from Natasha Denona, and this one is called My Dream, and so it has the same package, but it was released a little bit ago, a year or 2 ago. And I think that this color is, it's a little bit too light for me, I think, if I compare that to the the M1990 lip pencil, I think it's just, or to this lip pencil, that it's actually just a little bit lighter and a little bit more pink. And I think that it looks okay in real life. I don't think it looks as great on camera. And it has some vanillin in it, and I don't think it's too much vanillin. And I think it's a nice formula. But again, this is not a lipstick that I would probably buy again. And then I have a couple more palettes. So one of them is called the Mini Starlette palette, which was released maybe last summer or last fall, and which I talked about in a video before. So this one has a color story that has really muted peaches, and there's one that's sort of like a really muted lilac type of a shade, and there's a couple of shimmers in this one again. And I think this one is really super pretty, and I have used this quite a bit. And again, it doesn't have any aluminum powder in it. It doesn't have any Teflon in it. And I think it's a reasonable price. And I think that especially for travel purposes, this is really, really nice. And then I have two palettes that are both in the bronze theme. So one of them is a regular 5-pan palette, and it is obviously very warm. It does have just one shimmer shade in it, and then it has 4 mattes, and they definitely are leaning toward the reddish orange type of shades. And so I think this is pretty on me, but when I purchased this one, which was released as like a Christmas ornament last year, that I think this one picks the 3 best shades from this palette here, and it supplies it in this tiny little palette. And this was, I think, a particularly good deal, and I did just see it still on the Natasha Denona website. And I think that these 3 colors are ones that I can really wear quite well. And then if I'm looking for a more warm look, that these actually do look really pretty on me. And that even though this one is a little bit more on the orange side, it's definitely very wearable. On the other hand, when I have this one, I kind of feel like this shade is way too dark for me. And then this one is an okay shade, but it's really just kind of the same color as my skin, so I don't feel like it's really that necessary. And so therefore, I probably wouldn't have picked this one up again if I already had this particular little palette. And the little palette is called the Baby Bronze palette, and I hope that it will still be available for a while because I do think that was a nice little release. And then in terms of this I Need a Nude palette, this I think was the most popular release of all different makeup products that were released last year. So there are 15 different shades, and I think that all of these are really pretty and that they can be used on most people. Now for this one, 3 of the shades do have aluminum powder in it, so I have been avoiding using those 3 shades. So it turns out that all 3 of those shades are the 3 shimmer shades on the top row of this palette, so I just remember not to use them because of that. It is possible to remove the shades and just to have empty holes in there, or you could pick a shade from another one of these 15-pan palettes and pop it in there. So if you wanted to combine 2 or more of the palettes and just pick out either your favorite shades, or in my case, the shades that I am able to use without my eyes being irritated, then that is really easy to do, and I think that that's a real positive. So probably I wouldn't have purchased this if I hadn't felt like I was able to remove those shades. But I have found that even though I haven't been able to use those 3 colors, that this has been a really super versatile palette, and that I have gotten a whole lot of use out of it, and that it has really been worth it for me to have picked it up, despite the fact that I'm not using every single shade that's in here. Now, what I will say about that palette is that whenever I use it, even if I make an effort to use different shades or different techniques, I feel like my eyes end up looking pretty much exactly the same in all cases. So even though I think it's fun to use different shades and to have that nice palette, and that and that maybe the looks that you're creating are subtly a little bit different, I do think that just having that My Mini Dream palette, you can get something that's very similar to really any of the looks that you can get from the I Need a Nude palette. And the Starlette palette, I think it's a little bit different, but again, I think that at least when I create makeup looks, that it still looks so subtle that I think that it's not really that much different with that one either. But I do really like the Natasha Denona eyeshadow formulas, and I do like the way that they look on my eyes, and I think that I'm able to just throw on whatever kind of colors that just strike my fancy at the moment. And always I feel like I have something that turns out to be really nice, whereas I've dealt with a lot of other palettes where I've had to really struggle to get a look that I found was even acceptable. But these palettes, I think that no matter what I do, it's very easy to create a really, really pretty look. So because I had such success with the Nude palette, I've been looking a little bit at some of the other 15 pan larger palettes from Natasha Denona. So the one that I'm most interested in, I think, is the Retro Glam palette. And that one seems to be mostly mint greens with a little bit of purple in it. And that seems like it's a color story that might be way out there, but I think that it would be possible to use that palette to create a lot of kind of subtle looks. And that one just has one shade in it that has aluminum powder in it. And so I'm thinking that I might pick this up if I can get it on sale. And then another product that I'm really kind of interested in is called the Yucca palette. So this one does have a lot of shimmery shades in it, and it has a lot of really interesting colors in it that I think would work well for summer or fall type of looks, and that I think would work fairly well with my complexion. So there's a lot of like yellowish greens and really colors that I think would be really pretty. Now that one does have several shades in it that do have aluminum powder in it, so that would make it a little bit more limiting. But again, I think it would be a palette that I would really get some good use out of because I do like this Natasha Denona formula. And then there's just a couple of other larger palettes that she makes that don't have Teflon in them. So one of them is the Xenon palette. That one is mostly grays, and it does have a number of shades that have aluminum powder in them. And I think that grays are really not a great color for me when they're those kind of stark grays. I think that for someone else it might be a really attractive palette. And then there's one that's an older palette that is called Lila, which is kind of more on the purplish rose type colors. And then the My Dream palette, that one seems very, very purpley to me, and so I'm not sure how much use I would get out of that one, and it does again have some aluminum powder in it. And then there's one pastel palette that I think again might be a little too bright for me, and I think that one may be totally out of stock now and permanently gone. So in general, I do feel that Natasha Denona is really moving quickly towards creating a lot more products that I think I will be able to use. So I'm going to keep a real eye on this brand in the future because I have really enjoyed most of the products that I have used from her, particularly all the eye palettes. And I do really like that new foundation too. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else she releases in the future. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And if you have tried any Natasha Denona products, then I hope you will go ahead and let me know what your experiences with those were in the comments section. In addition, if you are interested in having me try out any other powder foundations like the Jane Iredale one or the Bare Minerals one or any of the others, then please let me know about that because I'm thinking that that might be something that I might be interested in doing. And in addition, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And Coco and I love you very much, so thank you very much for watching. Goodbye. Ba-da-ba-da-da-da.